Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here to join us again for another conversation on the Living Beyond the Numbers podcast. Today, I've got Matt Sivertsen, one of our three Matts in our Quad Cities office. So he's a senior financial planner and a shareholder here. So excited to have a conversation with Matt and hear more about his journey.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, welcome. I think you've got probably the longest history of anybody here with the Planning Center. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that story? Like, how did that get started?
Yeah, so it's already been 22 years. Hard to believe. I mean, with having some younger people around again, I definitely feel like telling them 20 years goes by a lot faster than you think it does. So it is pretty crazy. Just thinking about growth and development, where the firm's at, all that stuff. But yeah, to go back to where it started, pretty much coming out of school, it was one of those things where I felt like for me, it was a little easier to think about things that I didn't want to do, was something that kind of came a little easier. Just, this doesn't seem that great, whatever, wasn't too attracted to it. And I think the interesting thing to note for me kind of being, a child of the 80s to a teenager of the 90s and kind of entering the workforce at the millennia change, and basically, all of a sudden financial planning was just starting to bud, wasn't like it was this established thing. And so I think for me, just that discovery that it even existed was the first thing. So I think kind of what led me to that was just being at least a little interested in money, the intrigue and how it worked.
What was your major, Matt?
So my major was music. I was on scholarship to play saxophone at Illinois. So definitely kind of one of my first financial aspects was didn't have to pay for tuition. So that was cool. But definitely through that whole period was kind of interested in money, how it worked, kind of took as many little business and finance classes as I could. But I'll definitely say in like kind of starting to get exposed to finance stuff in college, the notions of like a broker didn't really appeal to me. Things like insurance, definitely didn't want to have like kind of a sales aspects. I do feel like I kind of knew that about myself early to know that I didn't really want to sell something. And so I do kind of distinctly remember in college asking some financial questions to my parents that were hard for them to answer. And so they referred me to their planner, who happened to be Marty Kurtz, who had founded the Planning Center. And he did come out of kind of a brokerage and insurance model and was kind of one of those pioneers in the 90s that went independent and opened a financial planning firm. So really it was kind of a process of finding him a little bit and getting turned on to articles and books at first when I was a student to, after graduating, almost a little bit of tell me more about what this financial planning thing is, and kind of kept hitting him up for even a job at some point. And I can remember the joke was always like next quarter, because we were in the kind of .com post crisis, 9/11, 02 was even worse the year after 9/11. And 03 was when I was kind of coming around hunting for a job. And so finally, I think by April of 03 had hired me, and then markets turned around and kind of launched into the profession. But that's a little bit of how it got started for me.
So I asked Matt Knoll the same question, like how he went from music to planning, because Matt's a big musician as well. So like how do those things relate, do you think?
I mean, the music aspect, really, the attributes that I think I really rely on today are just that, presentation, speaking skills, kind of being able to perform, kind of being around stuff where you're kind of constantly getting better. I mean, I think mindsets like pursuit of mastery, just this constant improvement mindset, knowing that, we can kind of be conscientious of our performance, how we're presenting ourselves, flow, speaking. So just all those aspects, I think, translated really well to, just mindset, motivation, improvement, and then just overall like delivery and who you're being, and kind of, knowing that if something doesn't go well, getting it back on and moving forward. So those are the couple things that hit me.
When I was teaching the music finance program as an adjunct, the head of the program always said that musicians made the best employees over the long term. because they understand pedagogy. They knew how to like practice and improve, and knew that it wasn't always going to be amazing to start. So, I mean, obviously, if you got a degree in music performance, there's a lot of practice hours that go into that.
Definitely hit 10,000 hours at some point. So you kind of go back to all that stuff. And I don't get to practice a ton. I still play saxophone today. And some people are asking me, how can you still be so good? It's like, well, thankfully I got, some 10,000 hours under my belt early and as a college student and in my 20s, so that I can kind of rely on that time and muscle memory and ear kind of savviness, I guess. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and similar, I think when you work with clients, it's some of that thing. Like once you know the music, you can then start to improvise. So you know how planning meetings run because you've been in them for 22 years. So you get to be able to be there and pay attention. And so I think that kind of ties into my next question was about you mentioned Marty Kurtz here. He founded our Quad Cities office and the name of the planning center. Can you just share a little bit more about your relationship with Marty and what it was like working with him for those years?
yeah, Marty was great because I think he really, showed me a way, showed me the profession. It was kind of one of those things of starting at $8 an hour with zero experience and just there was no job I wasn't, unwilling to do. And thankfully on an early aspect, he got me into meetings so I could observe. So I think that was kind of a key element early on is just being able to do so many activities within the firm because we were small, creating our trade desk, creating processes to follow up, but also just work meeting with a crazy amount of clients that, I could still sit in on them every day. I could still know what was going on and help with paperwork and trading the next morning. So everything was kind of like just right for the volume to be exposed to a lot of the skills of a small firm and observe and do a lot of little things. And then started certainly my track to 10,000 hours of being in a client meeting room, right? And those early several thousand would have been observing and being with him. And then as that iterated, working through my CFP and taking over some conversations of the meeting, I think that was the second step, was just having the rope to kind of, be with him and hey, Matt, take us through this plan, take us through these investment reports. And then just little by little, you're building your confidence to start to string together, what's this look like to kind of run the whole meeting and kind of control that whole arc and meeting narrative.
Yeah. It seems that mentorship is like talking to Canola yesterday. It seems like mentorship was a big thing for Marty, and it's really carried through into the firm in general. Like you mentioned it with Marty mentoring you. Obviously, you're mentoring a lot of the new people here. Do you think that's common in this industry, or do you think that's something that makes us unique?
I do think it makes us unique. I think in the industry, a lot of people are probably set up to maybe give people the observe aspect, but I think to really kind of take it to the next level and really debrief, the whys, the hows, the did you see like at this part of this meeting, like why I did this in a really specific way. And I'm not sure kind of all the planners and even just seeing a presentation on this, definitely talking about where a lot of firms are lacking is it's kind of like they want somebody to just come in and be able to do what we do in a hurry. And it's like, hey, you can sit in with me and observe. But then if they don't really create the teachable moments and talk about and process, and that's probably another thing that stems back to the music aspect is theater, music, choir, like you're putting on performances with your peers, they're critiquing you, so sometimes I think when you're a part of that process as well, you're comfortable living and learning and trying and, talk to me and do this little 2x2 and can I get better? And so I think all those are little aspects as well, just that debrief and willing to kind of talk about what you saw, what we can improve, whether it's upstream or downstream. I think that's healthy. But for younger people to get that mentorship and why we're doing things specific ways. And, in the end, we control the meeting, not the client. We don't need to bounce around like a rabbit or chasing a shiny object. We can park something and say, hey, we'll get back to that. We control the flow. So I think those are all like little things that we can just slow down, talk about, process.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to ask you about your role at the planning center. And so obviously you're a senior planner, you have your clients that you're working with, and you're also the director of financial planning. So maybe share a little bit more about with us and what that looks like in mentorship.
Yeah. So current state with the company, I mean, being kind of a full-time planner and having a pretty good client load. I'm really thankful for like the teams we have and collaborating with our operations team and tax team and people that are part of that process to get work done. So I mean, I think that's an aspect that helps me a lot is I can kind of come in and sit in the rooms and lead conversations and do what I'm really good at this point, and then know that I kind of have the support and elements around me to help with the rest. So then I do have like a lot of my Monday time is our management team calls and company things. So really dedicating probably, at least 1 to 1.5 days a week on, planning center oriented stuff with the management team. And very cool that we've kind of got a C-suite established with roles. And so I do feel like Jude and I are fortunate, and even Rob from the tax aspect, kind of coming in from the professional lenses, right, to oversee planning and our sales and marketing and our tax department. But just seeing like those other collaborators on our team that are really helping with business ops and compliance and being our financial officer and CEO. Right. So that's been a fun role to kind of be in that mix. Just because, we're not having to wear as many hats as we did when we were smaller. And
It's quite a change from, starting where you did to now, we've got this, we have 30 team members, I believe now. So, it's a, very different company as it's grown. I think the values though are the same. And that's one of my favorite things about the planning center.
right.
You've worked with families now for many years, across generations. So this idea, I hear this concern come up as we talk to families about, raising their children, that, the family maybe has a new level of wealth or income that wasn't part of their family experience growing up. And so, how do we maybe share some thoughts, just kind of, and, concerns on how, what are some concerns families have when they come and sit in with you on thinking about, that aspect of, helping raise financially aware children.
Yeah, I do feel like, for the 30 to 40-year-old group of people we serve, that have kids that are in that, budding teenage years. Generally, we're working with people, a little more successful, a little higher incomes. And even thinking about my journey, from great grandparents immigrating and farming and industrial to, grandparents not having a college education and working or farming, to my parents being the first college educated and starting to move into like middle and upper middle class with the work that they did and how we were raised. And so even thinking on myself of going through that and relating to a lot of the clients I serve, I could think back to, like all my needs were covered, kind of growing up middle class, and even to some extent, had some fun luxuries along the way, kind of had a few extra wants, but definitely had our needs and some of our wants. And so it is interesting, like that kind of American notion of being more successful each generation, and kind of seeing that with myself and seeing that with some of my clients. You do wonder, like, what's it look like for Gen Alpha, and my son's the first year of that. He's 14. He's going into high school next year, born in 2010. So it's just, watching him grow and evolve and kind of knowing some of the things that I know of the values of a middle class upbringing that instilled some things in me, do sometimes make you, question what will that be like for him. And because today, he does get a lot more luxuries in his life than I had. Been grateful to give him that. And then also just kind of society's change. We see year-round sports. We see things that are, between school and activities. It's tough to even work part-time and do babysitting or mow lawns and kind of some of all the stuff I can remember doing. I think people, maybe aren't kind of pushing their children to do that as much. So yeah, you just kind of wonder with values and work ethic and money scripts being different or being a little more upstreamed. What's that going to look like for them? Or is there any pressure for them to be more successful than us? Or do they have to, right? In some of the family conversations, can we start to build some stuff that would allow, children and grandchildren, the luxuries of doing some different things or not having to think as much about, what they're earning. So I feel like that's where I get into a lot of conversations with some of my peer group clients that are struggling with the same stuff.
Did you have like a part-time job in high school or what did you do? What was your experience?
Yeah, I did. So like growing up, I mean, I remember at an early age, doing babysitting. I remember at an early age kind of doing some lawn mowing. At some point even started doing some saxophone lessons. So all these little things earn money. And one thing I'm grateful for my parents is give me a little bit of financial awareness. I feel like the couple things that I reflect back on a lot are that my mom, gave me the money for like my saxophone lessons and I had to write a check. So like that was kind of my first responsibility as probably an eighth, ninth grader on was, yeah, we'll move the money and put this in, but you're going to have the accountability to pay for this. Right. And in that era, it was pay for it by check, didn't have the Venmos and all of that stuff. But so that was one thing. And then the second thing I really appreciate about what my folks did for me was when I kind of talked about those extra wants is they made me go 50-50 on a lot of stuff. So I do feel like as kind of a teenager, really thinking back, if I wanted that $100 mouthpiece or whatever pair of shoes that I didn't necessarily need, but I wanted, if I had $50 of skin in the game, I really appreciate that.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, you touched on this around, kids these days and teenage activities. Obviously, we see these, our daughter's 14 as well. And so we see how busy they can be. And if they're doing extra sports, the schedules that go along with it. What do you talk to families about? How do you help them think about navigating kind of some of what modern life of that, somewhat affluent teenager is?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally what comes up a lot is just a little bit of value system on money. And as we bake in a little more of kind of a instant gratification and entitlement mindset, you do worry about, motivation to go out or just that tangible understanding of what it takes. I mean, I've never pulled out the, money doesn't grow on trees thing or anything like that, but you do always kind of, just start to second guess a little bit when your teenagers just pushing you stuff on their cell phone and dropping stuff in the Amazon cart. And it's just a little bit of like, slow yourself down. Do they understand, that we work and make a paycheck? And so I feel like getting into some of those conversations with people and just, yeah, a little bit of entitlement on cars or whatever. I feel like I've faced with some clients talking about teenagers, what sometimes it's not about just even having a car. It's like what type of car. And so certainly that's kind of an upscaled mindset.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. I mean, you talk about, sharing the financial responsibility for some of these things. And I've had clients talk to me about this with regard to college, and they say, no, we want, you see the gamut, right? You see the family like, no, I want to pay for anything, no matter what. I don't want them to have to graduate with student loans we had. To the other side that says, no, they're 18, they'll figure it out. They can take on the student loans if they want to, and everything in between. So, I mean, tell me a little bit about those conversations you're having with families who are thinking about funding education. What do you see as being important there?
Yeah, you hit on a couple of the points. I mean, I do feel like I do get a lot of clients that like the notion of saving for a state school just as a baseline, right? Because I do think that's one of the harder aspects for a financial planner or a parent, right? If you've got a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old at home or often even 12, 14, 15, we have no idea what they're going to do. We have no idea how well they're going to do in school. So I do think that is the greatest quandary of trying to set aside money. And so I do feel like a lot kind of go at a state school cost and then kind of pivot from there if it's up or down and what kind of modifiers they want to put. Some kind of approach it will just do whatever uniquely for each kid. And some kind of feel like, I want like a level of fairness, and so how do we kind of have something quasi fair and maybe deal with inflation and something to that effect. But definitely have others that have paid for lesser school and more in for higher private school. So I think the more interesting phenomenon I've come into with some clients is where kids have gotten some scholarships or things, at certain schools that have been, will be a great education and a lower cost, but then have chosen a much higher cost as a election.
Yeah.
So I think just parents kind of wrestling with that notion of, hey, my kid got a scholarship to this university, but they want to go to this one and it's $60K a year.
Yeah.
So, and they have been willing to do it or in a few cases, but definitely laughs a little bit about, those checks he's got to write when if they chose option A, right, it would have been a lesser financial commitment than option B that was a choice to incur huge tuition bills.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's I mean, so much of life is those kinds of financial choices when you're talking about the families that are that we often are working with. It's, you're choosing among electives, and so making those choices can be a challenge. Have you touched on like our family values or ways that you help families kind of navigate that conversation or that question?
Yeah, it's interesting on the value set because it is so unique. I mean, I would probably say I haven't necessarily seen one viewpoint on it. I mean,
Mhm.
I try to kind of go into those conversations pretty open with people on what do they want. And I have still seen some with that mindset of I want to do kind of a minimum, maybe 25 to 50% of what those costs would be and still want my kid to have some skin in the game or take out some student loans. So I've definitely kind of had that side. And then the kind of the complete opposite I've had where they'll just pay 100% of everything, no matter, what it costs. And then there's a kind of in between. So I think that's fairly unique. Because I definitely have still, even with kind of our age group and clientele we're working with, have still seen some people that want their kids to have some skin in the game.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of the idea of this whole podcast of beyond the numbers. The values are more. A lot of our clients have the numbers to be able to pay for anything, right? They can pay the full tuition to Harvard for 4 years if needed. That's not necessarily the issue. The question is that part of their value system? Is that what they want to be doing? And then obviously some are doing, have enough for that state school, full paid. There's a huge gamut there, but it seems to be the values conversation is almost at least as important as the actual financial conversation.
Right. And then I feel like with some of the clients that have the kids that are either in college or just out of, just kind of reflecting on that the college experience has changed so much, like living environments are way more posh. A lot of the buildings have amenities like pools and hot tubs and gyms and then just the food aspect, we're not just the cafeteria meal plan. I mean, it's a food court, punch pass. And I even had a client telling me they were really frustrated about their daughter using DoorDash every day. So like all of a sudden I'm thinking about, oh man, yeah, these are new, different problems, for managing a 18, 19, 20-year-old away at school. And just when that experience has changed so much from kind of the suffer, crappy dorm room, crappy meal plan, day after day.
It's like I ate a lot of ramen in college, so that'll
Yep.
happen.
Yeah. So I mean, my scholarship here in New Orleans covered the meal plan, and so yeah, like I made it a priority. I made sure like I was there for breakfast because it was free. It wasn't amazing, but it was good enough. And still here in New Orleans now, the meal plans sometimes cover restaurants off campus and all sorts of things that it's New Orleans. It's pretty good food. It's hard to find a bad meal around here. So you're right. It's a very different college experience, I think, for many of our clients' children than we had or that our clients experienced.
Reflecting on my college experience, I was so thankful. I had my grandmother is so sweet. She gave me $50 a month. That was kind of my graduation present, but it was like $50 a month all through college. And for a college kid, I mean, I would always buy a CD or two just to have some fresh tunes and music because that was pre-streaming and all of that. But also as food, as the option to be able to go out and grab a couple good meals on that. And so just was so thankful. Had that $50 every month.
That's really cool. And I mean,
That is cool.
yeah, I mean, I think just even from like a family legacy standpoint too, like that you tie that into like this memory of your grandmother and something she specifically wanted to be able to do for you. That's really a neat way to go about it.
For sure.
Are there any other kind of those family stories or things about that lessons that you learned or stories you heard that you feel like inform your view of money or how you go about money and advise clients?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was just thankful that I at least got some exposure through my parents because I will say I feel like reflecting through that and even to this day, you don't really see financial education in the school system. So, I mean, and I guess observing with clients too, I mean, for the clients that have kind of at least given their children some financial acumen or even for the planning center, right? Opening our doors to have kids that are curious like I was, right? And my parents said, come talk to Marty. We encourage that, right? And it's how we have ironically found others like Matt Knoll, and my brother Andrew. So But then other kids, have gone on to do other things, and we've had hundreds of conversations with whether it's college kids or college grandparents. So I think that's kind of the aspect I'm grateful for, is that not that we talked about it a lot, or that there was just this open thing about money as a family. It wasn't necessarily that, but at least it was just enough to kind of be aware of the safety around money and security and saving and having a bank account, or not carrying around huge amounts of cash to like paying for my lessons and things like that, or having some part-time jobs to pay for half the things. It just made me aware enough, right, that I went to school with a head on my shoulders to ignore all those little credit card applications that were sitting in my little mailbox.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm grateful for, and wish the school systems were better, and I think it does land on parents and kind of firms like us, right, to open those doors for clients that know they want that for their kids as well. And even if it's not coming in to talk to their parents planner, we've got younger planners. Let's talk to an age appropriate person within our firm to help them. So I think those are all things that I'm grateful for, that I experienced, and I'm grateful that we still kind of continue to foster that with the clients we serve. And
Yeah, I think it's such a gift to know that even you can go and have a conversation with your parents about money, not even that you're going to get advice or things, but that, it's a thing we can discuss and have a conversation about. This is a safe and okay thing to talk about, is a tremendous gift in itself.
right.
All right. So we can move on to our rapid fire questions here as we work towards wrapping up our conversation today. So so Matt Sivertsen, what is your favorite animal?
Favorite animal? Bear.
All right. Is that related to football or just in general?
Just in general. I don't know, just always intrigued. Just kind of
Right.
big, burly, stand tall. I don't know, scary all in one.
Perfect. Is there a thing that comes to mind if you think it's always worth spending more money on?
Experiences.
Yeah. Say more. Anything in particular?
I would say, like, I'm one that I'm not a big like sports follower, but if I get anywhere, I'd be like the sports experientialist. Like if I could time something with a soccer game or a baseball game and see a ballpark and experience it, buy the cap for the home team. I'm a little bit of that type of person. And so sometimes just kind of watching out for those opportunities, even though you're not a diehard for the sport or a diehard for a team, just taking the opportunity to spend the money, the time, get into that arena or stadium and experience that. And that's one way I've done that.
And you've also managed to bike almost all over the world at this point, right?
Not quite all over the world, but a couple times overseas and
Okay.
a little bit of different places in the US. But yeah, I've gotten away a few times on some bike trips. Hopefully can do more eventually too.
Nice. So, what do you think is the best money you ever spent?
Keeping with the education bent, I would say definitely, investing in myself and education. And then certainly, I think just that adage of starting the net worth, that first dollar I saved as a 22-year-old, starting with the planning center and putting money in my account. I know that's going to be the most valuable one when I'm retired. And so just thinking about that, those two aspects, education and then the first dollar invested.
Nice. So, tell me about an achievement, the last achievement that you all celebrated as a family. What was it and what'd you do?
For myself,
Sure.
I guess, yeah, the achievement for myself that has been kind of fun recently is I got into doing this adventure triathlon stuff. And so it was like a kayak, mountain bike run. And for the Moline office and people around here, we have access to the Mississippi River. And in Moline, it's a little unique with this little side slough that goes around the Arsenal Islands, a little calmer water. So it's kind of in my backyard. And as crazy as it sounds, just kind of a challenge, like wanted to do that, kind of came from triathlon, running, biking, never had been a kayaker. I saw these people in those really fast, skinny kayaks, thought, oh, that'd be cool. So I went out and bought one a few years ago and literally took it out off the dock and in the Mississippi. And I'm just like tipping it. Like had no clue what I was doing, had no idea it was that hard. Probably most people at my age, one, wouldn't have even done it. Maybe would have quit after that first experience, but I did just kind of stick with it. And then sure enough, a couple years later, I've been winning this event where it's a kayak, mountain bike, and run, even in my 40s. And so I've been pretty proud of that. And we've celebrated that a little bit, just kind of overcoming something completely new.
So would you call yourself a somewhat competitive person?
Moderately, yeah.
Moderately.
Yeah, or also just like hard-nosed enough that I won't quit, like I'm not afraid to try new things. I mean, I've done a lot, and I'm thankful that, I was able to get like a well-rounded sports experience as a kid, right? People have to specialize so much this day and age. And so I feel like at least getting a diversified exposure, maybe jack of a lot of trades, but master of none, and so I think that's kind of carried forward in a somewhat competitiveness or hard-nosedness to be willing to go out and dunk that kayak for a bunch of times before I could, master it and get better slowly. So it's almost like little new things to pursue and try to master.
Yeah, Jude, Matt does have a win-loss record for his ping pong games. He gets everyone in the office on his phone. So there's a little bit of that competitiveness still in there.
I'm losing big time, but I still track that score.
That's amazing.
I'm way down against all of you guys. Yeah, and then music-wise, I did have one. I pushed myself out. I've played saxophone now for 35 years, and I'm in this cover band of Dave Matthews stuff, and I ended up jumping out and taking a limb and singing on 3 songs. I wouldn't hold myself out to be a vocalist or singer, but kind of my wife even was laughing, like, you can't remember lyrics to save your life. And so I just kind of was like, I know these tunes and I think I can sing them. And so kind of went out on a limb and they went pretty good. She told me it was an 8 out of 10, which I think in reality might have been a 6 out of 10. So my self-assessment was probably a 4 out of 10, but I got out there and I sang 3 tunes.
That's amazing. And my experience of your wife is that she's a pretty straight shooter. She would tell you if she thought it wasn't good. So I think you can take her word for it.
I didn't get booed off stage.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. And it's, I have to say, it's still so wild to me as somebody who lives at the bottom of the Mississippi River with as huge and as, much water is flowing through here. Every time you all talk about like going out on the Mississippi River just sounds like, taking your life into your own hands. It's just wild to me that that's part of like you go, oh, we're going to go take the boat out on the Mississippi River.
Yep.
Yeah. Like you would never do that here. So, all right. So speaking of places and travel, favorite place to visit?
Belgium was probably my favorite and was on the top of my list. I have been there twice. I do have a lot of ancestry through there, through my great grandparents, and seeing it kind of with my family, as well as kind of riding it, as Caleb mentioned, biking it. So I kind of have seen it in 2 ways. I felt like that was just amazing, beautiful countryside, the roads, the people, the architecture, very unique. The food suited me pretty good and all of that. So got to move to some other things on my list, but by far that was kind of the first on the list, and it's the one I've enjoyed the most that I've done a couple times.
Nice. And then any dream trip that you haven't gotten to do? What would be the top of your list?
Dream trip is probably Japan. And I do feel like it's kind of one of those cultures and societies where everybody tells me if you start walking around the sidewalks in Japan, you are going to get stopped, because I am 6'6", pretty tall guy, and I guess a bald white guy. So I'm told I would be treated like a celebrity over there just for my height and appearance.
Nice. Yeah. That sounds fascinating. So I'd love to see those photos. Well, all right. Last one. Best advice anybody ever gave you?
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I feel like that's probably one that, relevant to what we do, right? Relevant to money, relevant to investments. That's probably one that if you think about it and how many times we have to keep ourselves out of trouble, whether it's targeted marketing or, scams and you name it, investing things. That's probably the one that sticks with me the most, for sure.
Yeah, no, you work in this industry long enough, you see a lot of stories, and that one feels right to me. Well, Matt, thanks so much for being here today. It was really great having you on the podcast. So thanks a bunch for being here.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
Cool. Well, and so you can reach Matt is the original Matt at the Planning Center. So he is just Matt at theplanningscenter.com. It's Caleb at theplanningscenter.com, and I am Jude at theplanningscenter.com as well. You can find more about us on the website and also catch show notes at theplanningscenter.com/pod. Thanks so much for joining us today for Living Beyond the Numbers. Please like, subscribe, and follow us, and we'll see you on our next episode.